Welcome back to the weekly podcast, everyone. I'm your friendly cannabis commentator, Brand Strong here. Um, I, I don't really want to give too many credentials because I want people out there to feel like I'm just a normal person, like everybody else out there. My what I do for a living isn't really that important. This is just me talking about the pretty much the common sense, opinionated commentary about the drug war and mostly about cannabis, and that's kind of how I like people to perceive me. I don't like to feel like I'm some kind of an expert in anything, or whatever, or some kind of a political person. I don't want you to really like get too deep into my politics because maybe we don't agree on something, and maybe that'll make you not want to watch me talk about this issue. I feel like if you're here, then we at least agree on this issue, and let's just stick with that. Now outside of that, I will defend the knowledge that I do have and the things that I have seen, the empirical data that I have collected over the last 30 years of fucking being in this research and this issue. Reading these stories every time something came up. I was reading Sensimilia Tips, High Times magazines back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I was fascinated by cannabis when I was just a little kid, and throughout the time I grew up, I wanted to know everything I could about it. I got my first copy. Hold on one second. I got the first copy of Jack Harer's "The Emperor Wears No Clothes" like right around the time it was first printed. I learned how to grow by reading Mel Frank and Ed Rosenthal and Jorge Cervantes books back in the 80s. All right, so I don't know. I just kind of wanted to put all that out there. I don't want people to feel like if I get into some kind of a skirmish with you over some political shit, that I really, this is where I'm invested. This issue right here, this is squarely where I am at. But you really can't tell me that Hillary Clinton was a good candidate for cannabis in the 2016 election. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. I will say this though: if she was president right now, we wouldn't have seen over 200 politicians tweeting about how cannabis should not be a federal issue. We wouldn't have seen that. You know why we seen that? Because we got Jeff Sessions. How did we get Jeff Sessions? Oh yeah, because Trump won. Now I'm not saying I'm for Trump at all. Believe me, I'm not a fucking Trump person in any way, shape, or form. But when somebody tells me that Hillary Clinton was a good candidate for cannabis in the 2016 election, I think you're full of shit, quite frankly. And if you don't believe me, you want to go back and look and shit, I made videos about where the positions are, and I read off everything that she's ever said about cannabis. And believe me, it's not like she's on our side at all for legalizing shit. And if you like her medical marijuana stance, it was Schedule 2, which means the DEA and the FDA would shut down every medical marijuana program in the country instantly, and people would start making doses of THC and whatever. But we're not going to get all sidetracked into that. But I think I had to blow off that steam from earlier today. And again, like I said, outside of just right directly around the issue of cannabis legalization, ending prohibition, the drug war in general as a whole, I tend to believe that I do have my finger on the pulse of where most people are. So that's why I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of running this channel and discussing these topics, because I just feel the way that people should feel. Like, cannabis has been fucking illegal for 80 years. What more is there to know about what's going on with that? In modern times, there's new articles coming out every 5 minutes about cannabis. So, people are waking up, and I'm just another person on the side of the road with a sign to tell you which way to go, or where to, how to find the information you need. and to tell you what's going on. And if you don't got time to do all this research and reading, keeping up with all these different stories going on, currently there's still, most of the states in this country are working out their own cannabis laws. And there's less than 10 states that have zero like things going on. I think it's closing in on less than 5. There's not very much breathing room left for prohibition, and we're going to see the final the final gasp of it in this country, but not until after all the other countries do it, because America, we don't agree very good with each other, and you can tell when you can't even agree with people that's supposed to be on the same side as you about obvious shit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start the weekly podcast. I believe this is number 24. Wow. It says so. Okay, I think it is. I'm pretty sure. It's been more than a week, I think, since I made the last one. And we all know the story. Jeff Sessions put the Cole memo in the toaster and lit it up. And since then, the fallout has been nothing but delicious. And I still have yet to see anybody who's on Jeff Sessions' side really chime in about it. Uh-oh. We have technical difficulties appearing. All right, technical difficulties solved. All right, so we're going to get into the news here, starting with the international news. And there's a lot this time. These stories might be a couple weeks old. Might be because, I was kind of busy. Didn't get to do a bunch of stories at the end of the year, so you might get them, you might not. Norway becomes the first Scandinavian country to decriminalize drugs in a historic vote. Norway is to become the first Scandinavian country to decriminalize drugs as it focuses on treatment rather than punishment. The majority of Norwegian parliament, the Storting, backed the historic shift, which was supported by the Conservatives, the Høyre, the Liberals, Venstre, I don't know about these pronunciations, the Labour Party, and the Socialist Left. They directed the national government to reform its policies on drugs. So this isn't like they did any kind of, regulation package with this. This is just straight up. It's important to emphasize that we do not legalize cannabis and other drugs, but we decriminalize. Quote, the change will take some time, but what means a changed vision. Those who have a substance abuse problem should be treated as ill, not as criminals with classical sanctions such as fines and imprisonment. It goes on to give a bunch of other people's opinions about it and stuff. We'll watch this little video here.
I think there's
maybe technical difficulties might still be beating me down here.
new generation of MPs. MPs tend to be cautious on this. They don't want to be accused of encouraging drug use. But I believe the stronger case has come forward now and said that cannabis has a different use as a medicine, and we can't say to people, stop taking that, even if it's
terrible full screen. All right, whoops. Sorry about that. We'll just leave that one at that. Oh my God, hampered by technical difficulties. My computer is just acting really crazy right now. I tried to get to the bottom of it, couldn't do it. Rebooted it, we're still having problems. So this is a little update about the Duterte situation in the Philippines. The last time I made a video about him, I was like, so what about your son? He got caught, with ridiculous crystal meth, organization, operation, smuggling meth into his little island from, I guess China? I don't know. So I guess he resigned, and Duterte accepts it. President Duterte has accepted the resignation of his eldest son, Puelo Duterte, from his post as Davao City Vice Mayor sources said on Friday, January 5th. Earlier, they said that the president had 15 working days to decide on whether to accept his resignation as provided under the local government code. He has cited among the reasons for his resignation the smuggling of $6.4 billion Filipino worth of shabu, which is Philippine word for crystal meth, from China through the Bureau of Customs, where his name was dragged. The Senate Blue Ribbon Committee cleared him in the controversy, of course, but the Office of Ombudsman has launched its own separate investigation that targets public officials mentioning the Davao group. So there you have that. The drug war rages on in the Philippines. From my understanding, Duterte's approval ratings and public trust ratings all are really, really high, above 80%. So nobody's really freaking out about what's going on there. Crystal meth seems to be the biggest drug of choice of the drug addict population there. Duterte himself did say that he at one time abused fentanyl, the most potent opioid there is. So, just a crazy story that just keeps getting crazier. I guess Duterte's son gets to live to see another day, but will he see another deal? Will he continue his path of a crazy, ridiculous meth dealing kingpin? I mean, how crazy is this? Uh-oh. More of that crazy. I don't know what goes on here. I'm not even sure what story this was. It can't be the one I pulled. Okay, I guess that's just somebody's profile that wrote that article. And so I guess China's going down the road of Duterte here. Public death sentences kick off China's anti-drug campaign. This sounds more like something you would see happening in like Saudi Arabia or some shit. They believe, human rights groups believe thousands are executed in China each year, with a high proportion for drug charges. But basically, yes, lately they've kind of ramped up they had this crackdown, and they're trying to ramp up the enforcement of, quite frankly, the meth manufacturing, and the illegal fentanyl manufacturing hasn't really been mentioned too much, like they're really focused on it, but they basically said drug labs that manufacture other substances with an emphasis on opiates. And you gotta understand that when it comes to like research chemicals and what they call cannabinoids on the open market, that's a lot of those are manufactured in labs in China too. So who knows what's going on? It looks pretty grim. It looks like they ramped up their drug war, and guess who else is ramping up their drug war? Mexico. So in Mexico, so far, the military hasn't been able to participate in action against its own citizens in regards with the drug cartels. Well, all that's going to change now, as Mexican government has basically approved a law that enshrines the use of the army in the country's long war against drug cartels, overriding protests from the United Nations rights body and activists who fear it will encourage abuses by the military. The ruling Institution Revolutionary Party and some members of the center-right opposition National Action Party backed the bill, which now will head to President Enrique Pena Nieto's desk to be signed into law. Known as the Law of International Security, Internal Security, I'm sorry, the Law of Internal Security, the bill establishes rules for the military's role in battling drug gangs, a conflict that has claimed over 100,000 lives in the last decade. The military has been mired in several human rights scandals, including extrajudicial killings of suspected gang members and the 2014 disappearance of 43 students near an Army base. Supporters of the legislation say it will set out clear rules that limit the use of soldiers to fight crime. Rights groups are not convinced, saying the bill empowers security forces instead of improving the police and could usher in greater abuses and impunity. The United Nations, Amnesty International, and Mexican human rights organizations all lobbied lawmakers not to pass the bill. Who knows, this sounds like something that came from the top from our government or something. Like, Trump went over there and talked to the leaders in Mexico not too long ago, and he kind of joked around about the wall, and they kind of joked back like, no, we're not going to pay for that. And then he left, and it didn't seem like he really did a whole lot. I think they talked about NAFTA and how he was going to make NAFTA better for everybody, but really it just makes NAFTA worse for everybody on the ground, no matter how good you make it for the corporations. So, maybe this was part of what he talked about. Maybe he had like some people from Jeff Sessions' little gaggle of goons go with them and talk to Mexico about, like, maybe, trying to do something a little bit more to beat back the cartels. And really all this is going to do is start a even more bloody, situation in Mexico. Whenever you say, oh, you know what, we're going to ramp up enforcement and put more police on the ground and aim more guns at the gangs, when are you going to fucking look at history and learn that it just repeats itself? It doesn't do anything more or less than just repeats itself. How many times have we done this? I mean, maybe with the Al Capone situation, you might have learned it. Because when you tried to end illegal alcohol by putting Al Capone in prison for, tax evasion or whatever, 10 more fucking people bigger than Al Capone came out of the woodworks. And then after that, it would have just kept on going. They realized that they could not win that. And that's just the way it is now. They've kind of beat it back to a manageable level where they balance enforcement with leniency, and it's really just a targeted situation in America almost. When you look at the statistics, it seems like it's completely obvious that that's what it is. It's targeting blacks. Like, you got all these people getting charged with drugs. If you look at cocaine charges in America that get levied on people, even felonies, you have to look through there really hard to find white people. It's like 1 out of every 20, and almost everybody else is black. Same with marijuana. So the drug war, yeah, it's a racist war, and it's a war against people, and now you're literally gonna go to war with your own people in Mexico with fucking the military fighting the drug cartels. Orwell could never have imagined that one, man. That is definitely the craziest shit. And meanwhile, kind of like Duterte, I think they were still beating around the idea of medical marijuana in the Philippines, and now Mexico will allow the sale of marijuana-based products in 2018. This approved the sale of cannabis-based products, but without any licensed cannabis businesses, the goods must be imported. See, Jeff Sessions, that right there is how California could get rid of its 11 million extra pounds of weed every year. We could sell weed back to fucking Mexico. All this time that Mexico's been selling weed to us and making all that money from us, well, we can turn around and make money back from them off of the same shit. Beginning next year, the sale of cannabis-derived medicine, food, beverages, makeup, and other products will be permitted in Mexico, according to Reuters. Here's what you need to know. Mexico legalized cannabis for medical and scientific uses in June, but hasn't approved growing the plant or adult use. Rules for the sales of cannabis products are expected to be released soon, and the products could hit the market in a month. Beside imported products, there's a belief that some goods will be produced in Mexico with cannabis grown in other countries. Several other Latin American nations have legalized marijuana, including Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. But guess who's closer than all those places? We are. So come on. Come on, America. Get your shit together. I don't think it's ever going to happen, though. A little bit under the weather here, but my computer is even more under the weather. So this is a Canadian piece, and this I ran into this story before, and it was in America, and it was framed really propaganda-y, and like, oh, these people don't know the dangers of driving stoned, and it's like, well, maybe we do know the dangers of driving stoned, maybe you don't. And it's like they want to continue to make marijuana, to the people that don't know about what the effects of cannabis are on the mental, physical, and physiological, I guess, what it does to you. People that don't know are easily misled into believing that it impairs you like alcohol does. Like you start losing control of your faculties or something. Well, that's just not the case. I could sit here and smoke this whole joint down to nothing, and I won't be any more or less capable of reading these articles than I would if I didn't smoke anything at all. I'd probably be better reading after smoking because I kind of get into a better rhythm sometimes. But these people that act like, like it's a no-brainer. I mean, this is what Jeff Sessions was talking about when he said we need to re-educate the country about the dangers of marijuana. I mean, what are you talking about? Are you talking about strapping people to a chair and just making them watch car crash videos for hours every day and telling them that it's all marijuana that caused it or something? Like, how are you going to re-educate people? We know what marijuana does to you. We know if it don't impair you. And how it affects you is not the same as alcohol, whereas alcohol is like you literally start becoming blacked out and you start becoming halfway between consciousness and unconsciousness depending on how many drinks you have. If you're not a very experienced drinker, just 2 or 3 of them, man, you shouldn't drive. You shouldn't even drive after one if you're not an experienced drinker. You shouldn't drive after drinking any alcohol ever, period, because it's just dangerous. A new Health Canada survey shows that Canadians are hazy on the risk. Okay, and again, this is why I made this channel, because people cannot resist making fucking jokes out of cannabis stories and, just calling it pot constantly and breaking out the fucking munchie jokes and the fucking, stoner humor about how dumb stoners are and how they do dumb stoner stuff. Only half of the respondents who consumed cannabis in the last year felt that marijuana use affects driving, according to a Canadian cannabis survey released Tuesday, which compared 75% of all respondents. Another 24% said it depends, while 19% said cannabis doesn't affect driving. I'm kind of in the middle there. All right? Now, when they say only half said it was dangerous, or it affects driving, maybe they were saying that it affects driving in a different way. Like, maybe they said that it makes you drive better. That wasn't included in this poll or something, because a lot of reasons for that. Like, you might need to medicate before you drive because it's kind of nervous and paranoid out there. People are road raging all the time, and you got to be able to cope with the stresses of driving. Also, maybe you're a pain sufferer. Maybe you are an anxiety person. Any of these things, medicating and driving is probably a good thing. Yeah, I said it. It's a fucking good thing. All right? Never do I think smoking marijuana and driving is a bad thing unless you are somebody that gets really super impaired when you smoke weed. And if you do, you should kind of wait for a few for it to wear off, if that's what you feel. And I'm not an advocate for people getting fucking wasted and driving their cars all willy-nilly wasted. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this whole hype about cannabis being dangerous to drive on has gotten so fucking sidetracked and ridiculous that people are actually starting to make this shit sound like alcohol's safe to drink on or drive on, and cannabis is dangerous, because cannabis will make you fucking lose faculty and not have hand-eye coordination and be really slow reaction time type shit. All of which is just stereotypes born out of ignorance because somebody smoked a joint and sat there and was like, hey, I bet you could tell people this because you just feel like that would be the thing, you know? And this is stupid. You're talking to people that smoked cannabis in the last year. They ought to know whether or not their fucking driving was affected by smoking some cannabis and driving, all right? Because they're the ones that did it. Of those who had used marijuana in the last 12 months, 39% said they had driven within 2 hours of consuming cannabis at some point in their lives. 40% of those said they had done it in the previous 30 days, and 15% said they had driven after using cannabis in combination with alcohol. Uh-oh. Now, see, I don't agree with doing that either, because in a lot of people's metabolism, cannabis plus alcohol equals you probably shouldn't even try to walk. Only 2% reported an interaction with police related to driving under the influence. Survey results come as Ottawa grapples with how to best crack down on impaired driving after marijuana is legalized, which the Trudeau government has promised will happen in July of 2018. Well, I'll tell you how you crack down on it. First of all, you don't find someone to be impaired and driving unless they're driving impaired. Second, you give them a driving while impaired ticket. It's not that hard to do. I mean, you're looking for a way to make it severe and make people like go to fucking prison over it or some shit. It's just ridiculous. If there was some kind of a reason for that, that would be great. It took us decades. It took us like 8 decades or so before there was laws on the books talking specifically about what drunk driving is. Before that, it was just like, oh, he was fucked up while he got in that wreck, so, you know, drunk driving. You didn't have people getting pulled over and like, oh, sir, you're looking like you're a little drunk. I smell alcohol. You want to take a breathalyzer and do a field sobriety test? That shit didn't really happen, man. Maybe at one point in time, cops pulled people over and was just like, man, you're obviously too wasted to drive home. Get in the back. I'll take you to the, home or the drunk tank or whatever. But this whole idea that cops pulled people over because they went off the line a little bit and then gave them a breathalyzer and all that shit, that just started coming into play in like the 80s. So it took us that long to get there. Now that they're there and the money's so good, they're like, how do we keep this rolling in? And they see marijuana coming along and they're like, oh no, all these people are smoking weed instead of drinking, so we're not going to be able to pass out all these DUIs all the time. And they see it as a fucking another way marijuana legalization is going to hurt their business. And by their and them and they, I'm talking about the fucking cops. Every step of the way of marijuana being legalized is being difficult because cops are acting like they need this shit. They don't have anything better to do than to fucking arrest people for marijuana somehow. And quite frankly, we are sick of it. I'm just a regular person out here. And I can't tell you how just on the verge of revolution this whole country is over this stupid fucking weed shit. How the hell do you still have, marijuana shouldn't be illegal just based on the reasons why it was made illegal in the first place? Now you got all this bureaucracy built up around the enforcement of this law. It's the biggest government fucking thing there is right now, besides the actual military-industrial complex, which is like 60% of our budget. But the drug war is still a huge piece of the budget, and it's a huge piece of the bureaucracy that's in place all the way from the local level on up to the federal government. They got international efforts going on. They got, national efforts, obviously, clearly, and it's just a big, giant waste of money. Every year we still fund the DEA. We still do that, even though they have nothing but negative results to show us for the last 40 years or whenever they were brought into existence. almost 50 years the DEA has been in existence. They have zero to show you as far as progress. Like, this is how we stopped crystal meth in its tracks. This right here is how we solved the heroin epidemic back in the 1970s. Nope, they didn't do that. Let's see. Marijuana, yeah, man. Marijuana, we started working on that back in 1937, and yep, we shut that shit down, didn't we? They don't have anything to show you. You pull some heroin off the street these days, it's 8 times more pure than it was in the 70s, and it's like 5 times cheaper. How fucking much sense does that make? You'd think that the way that they're running this fucking enforcement operation, basically that they must be making money off the fucking sales or something, or what? What's going on here? I don't understand it. Cocaine, same fucking thing. Crack, same thing. It's all cheaper and it's all more potent and it's all everywhere. It's not just in the inner cities or the ghettos where they wanted to keep it concentrated, because it's always been a war against minorities and people that live in the inner cities, the poor. So, you got a war like that going on, and you have it a good, nice concentrated areas, and now all of a sudden, guess what? It's everywhere. So the DEA has zero successes to show for. All these bureaucracies, all the way down to the local cops, they want to enforce something, so they figure, impaired driving. We can still arrest stoners for that, no matter if they make it so there's no other crime at all in cannabis. So under the bill C-46, which sets out major changes to Canada's impaired driving laws in anticipation of marijuana legalization, people found to have 2 nanograms of THC per milliliter of blood within 2 hours of driving could be fined up to $1,000, with those with more than 5 nanograms facing up to 10 years in jail. That's got to be the most ridiculous thing I fucking ever heard, ever. Are you serious? How do you justify that? I mean, how do you defend that? How do you say that it's a legitimate sentence to give somebody 10 years in jail because they smoked a joint while they were driving? Are you fucking kidding? That's just insane, man. Critics have argued that there is no clear correlation between amounts of THC in the blood and the level of impairment, which can vary widely from person to person. What it could mean is that some individuals who really aren't impaired are going to be caught, and other people who are impaired are going to get away with drug-impaired driving, said Cooper. How about that nobody's getting away with shit, except for you guys are getting away with fucking jacking people up with these fines and filling up prisons with people that are fucking not doing anything wrong. See, these people are so stupid. When legalization comes into effect, more Canadians are going to be consuming marijuana, and more Canadians are going to be on our roads driving impaired. That's not been proven by any measure. In Colorado or Washington, where legalization has been going on for 5 years. Back to that Hillary Clinton thing. That's another thing there about Hillary Clinton. Is when I remember her position on legalizing marijuana in general, recreational or whatever. Oh no, we gotta wait and see what that experiment out in Washington and Colorado, how that's going. She took that Republican line. That's a Republican talking point, by the way. And what I say to that is, even in 2016, we had the data. The data was the sky didn't fall and the fucking ground didn't rumble. All right. Legal marijuana in Colorado has been nothing but a positive, and same with Washington. And if you don't believe it, go there and ask them. Why would all the people in their government be defending it against Jeff Sessions right now if there's any problem with that shit? And both of those states have reported that, I haven't seen any kind of a major story come out about this impaired driving in either of those places. And California is now trying to roll out with some kind of a zero tolerance kind of attitude about it. And we'll see how this plays out. But I give this shit about another 2 years before Supreme Court cases are going to start falling out, and you're not going to have this hype about this impaired driving shit anymore, all right? This is just another pipe dream by law enforcement to try to, edge their way back into cannabis arrests. Because quite frankly, the people at the top are the prison industrial complex bosses, the private prison owners, the people that, those people are, they're beating down the line, and the people down the line are the politicians, the local police. They're the ones that are like, hey, we need to maintain a steady flow of people going into these private prisons. Because that's how they scam the government. They're not private by any means. They're owned by corporations, and they get money from the government with asses in cells. That's how it works. They don't give a shit if they're doing human rights violations on a industrial scale. Respondents were also asked about their attitudes to alcohol, cannabis, and tobacco. While more than half felt that alcohol is completely societally acceptable, only 28% felt the same about smoking pot and consuming edibles, with just 19% feeling the same about tobacco. Well, we're beating tobacco. That's cool. Yeah, that's just kind of how it is, though. Everybody agrees that alcohol, for some reason, no matter how awful and horrible it really is socially acceptable. The survey was conducted between March and May of 2017 and included respondents from 9,215 people ages 16 and older. Of those, 2,650 respondents said they had used cannabis in the previous 12 months, either for medical or recreational purposes. And more news out of Canada. This person here, I'm not trying to criticize people just because of the look they have on their face at the time the picture was taken, but she don't look like she's like got it together, man. She looks like she's really like not happy in life. And she wants to give you 14 years in prison for providing cannabis to the youth in Canada. And she defended the provision during an interview on CTV's Question Period, which aired Sunday. This is kind of an old one. Oh, whoa. Yeah, April 16th. But I guess the point is this is still there, and they're still talking about it. Only individuals 21 or older. All right, that's in Colorado. In Canada, they're talking about this being 19 and up. So, okay, but right here it's for people 17 and under. So if you provide cannabis to somebody 17 and under, you can get 14 years. I just don't understand how you think you're making marijuana legal and then you have something like that going on. And by the way, the kid that bought the weed, they want to punish them too. And quite frankly, what are you going to do? Charge them as an adult? Because adults don't get, they're not breaking any laws. It doesn't make any sense. I found an article by John. Was this one the one? No. I kind of missed this story about the World Health Organization. I probably should have done something about it. But of course, CBD is a non-psychoactive compound in marijuana that shows promise in epilepsy and pain therapy. So the DEA wants to class it with heroin, of course. The World Health Organization's new report on cannabidiol found that the compound, which does not produce any kind of high and may actually counteract the psychoactive properties of THC, is not addictive, has no potential for abuse, and shows promise in a number of medical trials. So, of course, Trump's Drug Enforcement Agency wants to class it as a Schedule I narcotic, reserved for substances with high potential for abuse, no currently accepted medical treatment in the U.S., and lack of accepted safety for the use of the drug or substance under medical supervision. CBD is currently in the U.S. Phase 3 clinical trials as an effective treatment for epilepsy and in earlier trials for other applications. Apologists for Trump's prohibition on using the phrases evidence-based and science-based, say that these phrases are used as a bullying tactic in lieu of an actual argument, and argue that the phrase CDC bases its recommendations on science in consideration with community standards and wishes isn't a denial of objective reality, because science ought to be value-free, yet CDC and more broadly federal policy should embody values too. That's a tongue twister. Yeah, that was all one sentence. But the plan to schedule CBD is a crisp, ambiguous example of how policymaking in the absence of evidence becomes, because of values that are unsupported by evidence, produce terrible outcomes. People with chronic pain have turned to extremely dangerous substances to treat them, prompting an epidemic that has killed more Americans than the Vietnam War. The evidence for the existence of non-habit-forming, habituating self-pain treatment is a major cause for celebration. But the Trump administration and the Republican Party represent a base whose values are largely aligned in opposition to the legalization of any part or derivative of marijuana. So the evidence of the harm from marijuana is weighed against the faith of the policymakers and their base, and the evidence is discarded in favor of the values, to the detriment of individuals who are doomed be denied an effective treatment for debilitating illnesses in society because of their loss of those people's productivity and the pain and suffering of their families, and the foreclosure of CBD to help mitigate the opioid crisis. Instead, CBD is thought to have a broad range of actions on the endocannabinoid system, a collective of neurotransmitters that bind to receptors in the nervous system to mediate a variety of physiological processes, including mood, appetite, pain, and inflammation. Though researchers are still working out all of CBD's functions, studies on animals and a small number of humans have found no evidence that it is toxic or addictive. It is relatively safe compound that is no more addictive than placebo in studies. In terms of therapeutical potential, several clinical studies have found that pure CBD is effective at treating some types of epilepsy. In some cases, it can completely eliminate seizures. There's even a pure CBD product, Epidol-X, currently in phase 3 trials, and researchers are also looking into using CBD for a range of other medical conditions. Though this work isn't as far along as the epilepsy research, the ECDD noted that there's positive preliminary data for the treatment of a range of conditions. These include Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, anxiety, pain, nausea, inflammatory bowel disease, and rheumatoid arthritis. There's also evidence to suggest that CBD may be helpful in combating opioid addiction. With the expanding data and growing acceptance of marijuana in the United States, there has been a crescendo of interest in CBD and other cannabis products. Funny that you mentioned the word crescendo in this article, because as I read all this, I like it, but we need to start including THC more in the conversation and the crescendo effect of all the other things in natural whole plant cannabis, because that's what the DEA really don't like. If you think they're against all these other things, you're wrong. They're actually not against those things. They're not against isolating things from cannabinoids individually and making medicines out of those, because that is where they can get the corrupt money and they can charge ridiculous amounts for doses. So yeah, we don't doubt that. But anyway, DEA has doubled down on its position that CBD as part of marijuana is a Schedule I drug. In December of last year, the DEA made the point clear by creating a new drug code for marijuana extracts, including pure CBD. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. CBD, everybody should have a big fat jar of pure CBD oil just in their cupboard, all right? That's what I think, and it shouldn't be expensive. Now, you go out there into the world and you go to buy CBD products, they're expensive. They're as expensive, if not in some cases more expensive, than THC products. You're like, what? You don't even get high off the shit. Is it that good a medicine? I'm not sure. Well, I'm doing some experimenting, and I got some people reporting back to me on different patches and vaporizers and shit. I'll let you know later on about that. Uh-oh. All right. So back to the crackdown one more time. I'll mention the actual nuts and bolts and whatnot of this so-called crackdown that Jeff Sessions is dreaming about while he goes to sleep after eating his striped cookies. You know, he puts his elf hat on the shelf, and yeah. Anyway, whether to crack down on marijuana in states where it is legal is a decision that will now rest with those states' top federal prosecutors, many of whom are deeply rooted in their communities and may be reluctant to pursue cannabis businesses or their customers. When he rescinded the Justice Department's previous guidance on marijuana, Attorney General Jeff Sessions left the issue to a mix of prosecutors who were appointed by President Donald Trump's administration and others who were holdovers from the Barack Obama years. Legal experts do not expect a flood of new cases, and people familiar with the job of U.S. attorneys say prosecutors could decide against using already limited resources to seek criminal charges against cannabis companies that abide by state regulations or their customers. So I just made a video, the last video I made was about how this crackdown is just one big failure and backfire on Sessions. Well, here's another way it backfired. And what I mean is everybody's talking about cannabis shouldn't be in the CSA. The federal government shouldn't be enforcing cannabis laws, especially in places where it's already legal. That's a blown up conversation now. It's already been building since Sessions started his little weed war back in the beginning of last year. But now, after this latest move of rescinding the Cole memo, not only is everybody talking about it, but they're talking about it like he don't like to hear. Like they're like, well, you know, marijuana's actually good. Marijuana can actually get us out of this opioid epidemic. Marijuana's better for pain, this and that. Marijuana this, states' rights that. You know, you're hearing all this shit from all these politicians, and meanwhile, on the ground, the prosecutors ain't even really down. They don't really want to do this shit. Even the ones Trump just appointed, except for maybe those lackeys that really have no experience, and they're just like, hey, we need you to do our evil bidding. Maybe you'll see some of them. But by and large, man, I don't think these prosecutors want to make all that kind of noise, especially where it's legal. So this is going to be a huge backfire. I'm convinced that there's not going to be a crackdown still, but we'll see what happens. But the people that do get busted, because there's going to be a token bust that's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon, and it's making me really angry and sad thinking about it, that I have to do a story about it, and I'm going to be really pissed off when it does happen. And so is the rest of the country. And that's probably why this is all a good thing, that Sessions is the AG, and this is all happening for a reason, guys. Because we needed this fight to be right in the forefront of the discussion, not something that politicians are actually afraid to even talk about because they'll lose all their political capital and nobody will vote for them because their opponent will easily use cannabis as an issue against them. So that's not a thing anymore. So it's like almost 2/3 of the country is for legalizing it. So if you're a politician that's for prohibition, you better shut up about that, because that's what's going to get you fucking voted out of office in 2018. Believe me, it's going to be a big issue. People are going to use it in their races. And if you're a Democrat and you're thinking about not using it, don't be a fucking idiot, all right? If the Democrats don't fucking embrace this issue now, they're basically not going to be a party in the next couple of years. They need issues like this to fucking embrace, where the country's all the way behind it. All you got to do is go up against your opponent and say, hey, I'm for this, and you're not, so fuck you. And that issue right now is cannabis. Anyway, there are higher priorities, terrorism and opiates to start with, said Rory Little, a former prosecutor and professor at University of California, Hastings College of Law. You also have to draw the jury pool from the local people who appear to generally support the state policy. You're not going to waste your resources on cases that you can't win or cases your community is against. So if you're in Massachusetts and, you know, you start arresting, you know, dispensaries and shit as soon as they open or whatever to try to thwart their industry from even getting off the ground, the people in that community have already seen medical marijuana play out for years. They know that there isn't any problems, and they're just going to be like, no, this is bullshit, and the jury's going to feel the same way. So it's not a very good idea. Until Sessions' announcement on Thursday, federal prosecutors followed guidelines laid out in the so-called Cole Memo, which was issued by the Justice Department during the Obama administration. The memo discouraged prosecutors from going after people and participating in the marijuana trade in the states where recreational marijuana is legal. Actually, medical marijuana is legal except in cases with aggravating factors. Sessions revoked that document and others, citing the fact that pot remains illegal under federal law. Federal prosecutors are not elected, but they often have long histories working in their districts. They are surrounded by attorneys who have spent their careers arguing federal cases before judges who can make their displeasures with U.S. attorneys known in sentencing decisions and in scheduling of cases. That environment will not change because of a memo from the Attorney General, Little said. But the change will undoubtedly create some confusion and an uneven landscape, said John Walsh, the former U.S. Attorney for Colorado appointed by Obama, who left the office in 2016. Prosecutors in western states wanted guidance from the Justice Department when the likelihood of state marijuana legalization became clear in 2010 and 2011. They hope to avoid a patchwork of prosecution strategies, Walsh said. What he means by that is when they legalized, they didn't want the federal government to just come in and start making busts to set precedences and make it so the people got afraid to invest, and it would have stamped out the industry before it would have got up and running. And that's just to say the sales industry. All they're trying to do, all Sessions is doing is emboldening the black market. Whether it's people that, because, say like you start busting dispensaries. Oh snap. I guess all the other people are going to continue business as usual because it's still legal to grow weed and all this other shit. They're going to figure out ways to keep selling weed to each other, man. And the DEA might bust the big growers and the big sellers, but that's just going to empower the grassroots to, flourish even more with small growers and small sellers, people that won't get noticed as much. When the policy is so broad and uncertain that it's left case by case to different decision makers, it creates confusion and uncertainty that can be unjust, Walsh said. The author of the Obama administration's policy, James Cole, told the AP it was intended to put states on notice that they had to regulate the industry and the federal government would still prosecute cases that threaten public safety. The goal, he said, was to encourage a tightly regulated industry, letting legitimate businesses operate, but keeping cartels and gangs out. Yeah, you hear that, Sessions? He wanted to keep the gangs out. What you're talking about is bringing the cartels back in. I couldn't immunize people through the policy, but it did give them a level of comfort that was enough for them to say, if I behave, we're basically going to be okay. The change, he said, removes clarity and consistency for an industry that depended on it. The U.S. attorneys around the country responded cautiously to Sessions' announcement. Some issued written statements suggesting that the change would not dramatically alter their approach to marijuana. In Colorado, U.S. Attorney Bob Troyer said his office will continue to focus on, quote, identifying and prosecuting those who create the greatest safety threats to our communities around the state. Troyer took over the office on an acting basis when Walsh, the Obama appointee, left in November. Sessions named him the interim U.S. Attorney General. Trump could nominate a replacement at any time or decide to keep Troyer, a career prosecutor and attorney. The new U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts, Andrew Lelling, who I read his letter, a Trump appointee who was confirmed by Senate in mid-December, called marijuana a dangerous drug in his statement on Sessions' action, but he also said his office will focus on bulk cultivation and trafficking cases and those who use the federal banking system illegally, while considering its available resources, the seriousness of each crime, and its effects. He sounded to me like the one that might actually do something, and by the sound of his strategy of what to go after, it sounds like he's going to go after a really big player to kind of like to set an example. Like, that's what right-wingers always think, that if you punch somebody that's big enough and they fall really hard, all the littler people will be too afraid to, step up to the mat. In California's Eastern District, newly sworn in U.S. Attorney McGregor. And if you're on here, and I'm sorry about acting like I hate right-wingers or some shit like that. I just know how to identify the right-wingers. They're the authoritarian people. If you don't think so, you're goofy. You're just goofy. The right-wingers are all throughout history have been the authoritarian people. Now, there have been dictators in the communist realm. I'm not saying that that's not true, and I'm not saying that they weren't authoritarian in their resolve, but come on, guys. Jeff Sessions is an authoritarian. That's what he is. He's an authoritarian. He's not for states' rights. He's for ultimate federalization of the states. Unless you're talking about an issue that's his, like something like, I don't know, Jim Crow laws. Who knows? Anyway, back to the subject at hand. In California's Eastern District, newly sworn in U.S. Attorney McGregor Greg Scott grew up in Humboldt County, deep in California's famed Emerald Triangle marijuana-growing region. He later became a career state and federal prosecutor who has spoken favorably of previous federal marijuana crackdown. Scott's spokeswoman Lauren Horwood said he declined to comment on the most recent federal move. Quote, the cultivation, distribution, and possession of marijuana has long been and remains a violation of federal law for all purposes, she said later in a statement. We will evaluate violations of those laws in accordance with our district's federal law enforcement priorities and resources. Brian Vicente, a Denver attorney who co-wrote Colorado's 2012 constitutional amendment legalizing recreational marijuana, said the industry will closely examine the background of any new U.S. attorney nominees. Now, Colorado's law is a constitutional amendment. So that kind of like tells the federal government, like, we don't care what you fucking think. In this state, it's part of the Constitution. It's a pretty powerful way to have your law written. If this is if this is in any way accompanied by a changing of the guard through the appointment of very conservative anti-marijuana candidates, that's a red flag, he said. Walsh, the former U.S. attorney for Colorado, said sitting in and incoming top federal prosecutors in pot-friendly states should rely on their staffs who have years of experience investigating cases to put marijuana in context with other priorities. Yeah, last time I checked out west there, it was fucking like Breaking Bad out in that bitch still. Like meth labs everywhere. Come on, man. You guys definitely... I don't understand how prioritizing marijuana is ever expediently like a good idea. These people sit around in their smoky fucking backroom offices thinking, oh yeah, what are we going to do, guys? Are we going to keep busting marijuana, or are we finally going to go after the drug cartels? Or are we finally going to go after the meth? Nope, we're going to keep busting marijuana because we're basically like, that's the lowest common denominator. The easiest ones. They're not shooting back at us. All right, that's it. The crackdown only comes when one of these prosecutors decides, hey, he don't like what he sees. If you see somebody just busting something because it's like this giant weed factory in Colorado, then we have problems. All right. The story's still kind of developing, but the VA issues new medical marijuana policy for military veterans. So they still can't recommend medical marijuana, but they're going to be encouraged to talk more about it with military veterans. Yeah. The directive urges government doctors to discuss with the veteran marijuana use due to its clinical relevance to patient care and discuss marijuana use with any veterans requesting information about marijuana. Policy reiterates the department's long-held position that to comply with federal laws such as the Controlled Substances Act, providers are prohibited from completing forms and registering veterans for participation in state-approved marijuana programs. Which sucks because veterans don't always have the $50 or whatever it might cost more than that to see a doctor to get a recommendation. But at least they're not getting kicked out of the VA's treatment system for it now. VA mistakes federal law. In fact, no provision of federal law blocks the department from allowing its doctors to fill out medical cannabis recommendation forms in states where it is legal, even under continued federal prohibition. In 2003, a U.S. Supreme Court let stand a federal ruling finding that doctors have the First Amendment right to recommend medical cannabis to patients as long as they don't actually provide the marijuana. Guess that means nothing. The only thing standing in the way of the government doctors recommending medical cannabis to veterans and the VA's own internal policy, which the department's Veterans Health Administration just extended with the new directive. With this new directive, VA Secretary David Shulkin has repeatedly tried to pass the buck to Congress when asked about the issue in interviews. Yeah. This guy, I got mixed feelings about Shulkin, man. By the way, I'm a veteran. I mean, I don't really care about this situation here because I've long left the VA's treatment system because in the 90s, they basically held me to this piss test standard. Like, you piss in a cup or we're going to stop seeing you and treating you. And if we find marijuana in your piss, we're going to stop treating you. And that's where I said, see you later. During a White House briefing earlier this year, he said that state medical cannabis laws may be providing, quote, some evidence that this is beginning to be helpful, and we're interested in looking at that and learning from that. But he added that until time the federal law changes, we are not able to prescribe medical marijuana for conditions that may be helpful. We're not asking you to prescribe it. We're asking you to give the recommendation. It's a little piece of paper that all you have to do is sign it. It's not a prescription. That would be providing marijuana or assisting in the provision. Shulkin has even gone so far as to allege that the agency can't even participate in research on medical cannabis. From the federal government point of view, right now we are prohibited by law from doing research on it or prescribing it, he said in one interview. We are not going to be out there doing that research or prescribing these different medicinal preparations unless the law is changed. In another interview, Shulkin said that it is not within our legal scope to study that in informal research programs or to prescribe medical marijuana, even in states where it's legal. Oh, I'm sorry if that's distracting people up there behind me. He added, if a law change at the federal level is appropriate, that could happen. And I'm thinking maybe not. Like, the VA's going to just still be even if they took it right off of the CSA. I already mentioned that this is not a prescription, it's a recommendation. Other details, in addition to prohibition on recommending, making referrals, or other completing forms registering veterans for participating in state-approved marijuana programs, the new VA directive continues a policy that the government won't pay for veterans' medical cannabis. Shucks. Nobody's paying for medical cannabis in America for a long time, guys. These insurance companies they're so against cannabis being legalized because of that. They're fucking freaking out. So don't expect it ever. It also specifies that the directive only prohibits the use of medical marijuana by VA employees, not patients who don't work for the department. Yay. Quote, veterans must not be denied VHA services solely because they are participating in state-approved marijuana programs, it says. Too bad the NFL and the NBA and other people like that can't, adapt this policy at least. Those patients just have to get their cannabis recommendations from physicians outside the VA, which can be costly and confusing for some veterans. And sad in general that you have to do that. The new policy also seems to further encourage government doctors to more closely track and record information about veterans' use of cannabis, medical marijuana. Clinical staff may discuss with veterans relevant clinical information regarding marijuana, and when this is discussed, it must be documented in the veteran's medical record. It says providers need to make decisions to modify treatment plans based on marijuana use on a case-by-case basis, such as decisions that need to be made in partnerships with the veteran and must be based on concerns regarding veteran health and safety. Well, we know that you guys don't have any research, so how do you know if anything's dangerous? We know it's safe because we're actually doing this shit. Thanks, Tom Angel, for that research. That he's been staying on this story, like all other stories. Make sure you go check out marijuanamoment.com. And yeah, follow him on Twitter and Facebook. All right, let's see here. We're back. Trying to make it through some technical difficulties here. So, like I was saying, we have more fallout coming on the way. Don't worry, it's coming. You know, like I keep saying, I haven't heard anything from Chris Christie yet or Governor LePage as to, you know, what kind of end zone victory dance they're doing or whatever the fuck. But we have heard from a lot of people about the Sessions rescinding the Cole memo thing, and you know, I don't like to keep beating the dog on this one, but here we have you know, Ron Paul. Ron Paul is the revered, you know, libertarian god or some shit like that. Basically, he's like the a little bit slightly better version of a politician for somebody that was always a Republican than Rand Paul, his son. Now, Rand Paul, a lot of people would argue, isn't really a libertarian, and I would go ahead and agree with them there. And I'm not really a libertarian myself. I agree with them on a few issues. The drug war is the one that I think the libertarians pretty much have the best position on, which is let's just fucking end it, all right? Personal freedoms is their mantra. Even if the Koch brothers convinced everybody that that, you know, the taxes is the number one issue or whatever. Yeah, it is for them because they're billionaires. Of course, taxes is the number one issue, and regulations. By the way, they hate regulations over there at the Coke Industries. So, you know, Ron Paul has always been for legalizing marijuana, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure exactly the wording behind his position is, but I know that when his speech about it comes, it's always the same thing. The government has no business in our fucking business. You know what I mean? The government shouldn't have the nanny state authority to basically wag their finger at you and tell you what to and not to do with your body. Although I'm not sure how he feels about abortion. So anyway, let's just check out what he had to say.
Why must Sessions go?
Well, because he represents something that is so un-American as far as I'm concerned. The war on drugs, to me, is a war on liberty. Yeah. I think that we overly concentrate on the issue of the drug itself, and I concentrate on the issue of freedom of choice on doing things that are of high risk. And we permit high risk all the time. I mean, if you look at study of philosophy and religion, that's very risky stuff. There's bad ideas out there. Generally, we allow people to eat what they want, and that is very risky. But we do overly concentrate on what people put into their bodies. So to me, it's an issue of liberty. And Jeff Sessions is not a libertarian. He's not a civil libertarian at all. And the war on drugs is a totally illegal system. And if you look at it carefully, our traditions has been that the government recognized that we don't have the right to regulate the sale of drugs. In 1914, when he passed the Harrison.
All right, we're going to go back a little bit. I don't know if I edited this or not in the final video, but I missed something there, so I'm going to have to go back.
It was done over taxes. Tax them. That's how we'll get them to quit using it. 1937, same thing with marijuana. The same thing when they wanted to manipulate Obamacare. They put taxes on it. They don't use they don't endorse the concept they have a right to do all these things. So,
see, I mean, like I said, I don't agree with the libertarian position that everything is based. Every wrongdoing the government does to you is based on taxing, or everything they try to do to take away your liberties is through taxing. No, it's through direct action, man. What do you mean taxing? They didn't just tax you with the tax stamp to make marijuana illegal. That's not how it went down. They created the tax stamp, and then as soon as someone tried to get a tax stamp for their marijuana transaction or whatever growing, then they got busted. Just like alcohol, you got busted if you had alcohol. I mean,
I think it's very questionable constitutionally. They shouldn't be doing it, but it's so terrible. It is an excuse to violate civil liberties wholesale. And Jeff Sessions has been one of the worst. And usually I don't ever get involved in these personality squabbles, but this is one major setback. Obama did something decent there. He backed off, and I thought that was a good move, and Sessions wants to reverse that.
Fair enough. Like I said, when it comes to the drug war and any of that shit, I'm usually really close to the libertarian position than any other position. Republican position, obviously, is to keep the drug war running on all cylinders.
The brand new Nissan Rogue Sport, now with available Nissan intelligent mobility technologies, like automatic emergency
and start arresting them. And then you got the Democratic position, which is, marijuana becomes another stream of revenue for the government and the corrupt lobbies that form around it. So they're happy with legalizing, but not getting rid of criminalization, because for some reason they're still beholden to law enforcement and prison industrial complex types. So the Democrats are about there, and libertarians are just like, you know what, get your hands all the way off it. Let people do whatever they want. Let people put in their body whatever they want. And when it comes to the production and manufacture, distribution of cannabis, they're like, hey, hands off that too. Leave us to our, leave it alone, like tomatoes. So here's a Shatterproof, which is a organization, Shatterproof statement on the CDC's opioid overdose death statistics that came out for 2016 just recently. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention released new data today showing that the deaths from drug and opioid overdoses increased 21% in 2016. And I think what you're going to find is that this increase is a trend that started around in here, and it's going up. It's going to go up again next year. I mean, next year's already happened. 2017's already done. And I've already heard that the numbers are spiking again for 2017. We don't know exactly what that exact number is yet. Center for Disease Control and Prevention released new data today showing the deaths from drug and opioid overdoses increased 21% in 2016 over the previous year. Shatterproof founder, CEO Gary Mendel released the following statement about the data that 63,000 Americans lost their lives. Quote, today's devastating numbers are more than just statistics in a report. They show how many American parents have had to bury their son or daughter related to this disease. I know from my own painful experience that behind every death there are countless family members and loved ones whose lives are forever shattered. This data only increases the urgent need for real federal and state action that will save lives. Since President Trump declared a public health emergency this fall, the administration has failed to implement real evidence-based solutions to the crisis or find ways to use existing dollars more efficiently. The public health emergency declaration means nothing unless it's coupled with scientific responsibilities, deadlines, and action plans. This preventable loss of life proves that we cannot wait while the government drags its feet, so we are using a business-like approach to take decisive action. In November, 16 health insurers signed onto the National Principles of Care, agreeing to uphold a set of standards that will lead to better addiction treatment. In the months ahead, the Substance Use Disorder Treatment Task Force will execute its specific plan to ensure that every American with a substance use disorder has access to treatment based upon proven research. We hope the government should follow our lead and start acting. Our families are counting on them to do so. Now I've heard a lot of criticism around the internet when they looked at the actual raw data behind these numbers. What they're finding is that when you're talking about fentanyl deaths or opioid deaths in general, a lot of the times they're not just standalone. The guy or the person took fentanyl and then they died. Like they knew they were going to take fentanyl and they took fentanyl and they died. That's not usually, that's not how it really went down in the raw data. Because in the raw data, what you'll find is that all these overdoses are, a lot of them, the vast majority of them, are combinations of 2 or 3, sometimes 4 different kinds of pharmaceutical pills, or pharmaceutical pills mixed with alcohol. And a lot of times the fentanyl deaths will also be coupled with street drugs like crystal meth or heroin. But a lot of the opioid deaths are tied in with benzodiazepines like Xanax and stuff like that. So, you know, it is what it is. The deaths are still getting attributed to fentanyl or opioids if someone died and that's what was in their system. Could there be a more scientific way that we look at these statistics and this raw data and make these charts and shit out of it? Yeah, there definitely should be. But in general, is it safe to say that if somebody died from fentanyl, plus they had Vicodin also in their system, and they also took like a benzodiazepine and some kind of a heart pill too, do we just still blame the fentanyl? From what I understand, they blame everything. Like if you look at the benzodiazepine deaths, that'll be chalked up in there too. So you can technically die more than one time on these. And if you look at the raw data and then you look at the breakdown charts and shit like that. So I kind of agree with some of the outrage in the message boards and the comment sections of these stories like this one. This one don't have those, but in general, like if you go to the mainstream breakdowns of this report from the Center for Disease Control, people notice the raw data and they see what's in there, and no matter what, your takeaway is that there's something fishy going on. They're trying to. You feel like you're being duped because so far the government has done nothing but lie to the people about the whole fucking everything to do with drugs. All right, like you go back all the way to the turn of the 19th century, or the turn of the 20th century. I'm sorry, when you know. Cocaine and heroin were just invented in the 1890s or a little bit before that. And, you know, basically the pharmacopoeia consisted mainly of strange concoctions that people basically made and said that, hey, this shit works. And a lot of times maybe the shit did, and sometimes the shit was really dangerous, which is why we had to come up with some kind of thing like the FDA. But basically what I'm saying here is that we haven't really went too far from there in 100+ years. But what we have done is we've let the government lie to us about every fucking aspect of this shit. The corrupt players have been in place for a long time, producing all the drugs and telling you which drugs are okay to use and which drugs aren't for which symptoms. And they're getting proven wrong in big ways all the time, and it's not good. Like we're finding out that with psych meds, you know, it's just there's this whole idea that, you know, they're going to fix your problems with pills. And basically each patient that goes to a psychiatrist becomes a fucking lab rat. And I mean, there's more than just speculation, man. If you think that's speculation, give me a break. You need to move on with believing everything that doctors tell you. You need to move on with trusting every pill that the pharmaceutical corporations crank out. I mean, and the federal government, you should definitely not trust them, and I'm pretty sure not too many people do when it comes to the FDA. Because come on, man, the FDA had PCP was legal at one time. And they even Schedule 2'd it for a while before they Schedule 1'd it, after they couldn't really do anything in Schedule 3 anymore. In Schedule 2, they were like, you know, hey, doctors, and, you know, go see what you can do with this. I'm not even lying, man. This is real talk. You know, the same people that at the same time were saying, oh, no, cannabis, not medicine. And this is back in the 70s when fucking, over in Israel, they were actually isolating cannabinoids and finding out that, yeah, cannabis is medicine, and doing all the research that we still haven't had the ability to do in this country. Speaking of the opioid epidemic, you know, I'm in Michigan, so I'm always wondering, how is Michigan doing in all this? Let's see if this video is worth watching first. All right, well, let's see.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Right now, Michigan communities are joining together to tackle the nation's opioid epidemic. And their sites are the pharmaceutical companies who make these pain.
Yeah, I'm not doing too good today with the internet and stuff, so so history has shown abuse of pills, pain pills, has led to abuse of drugs such as heroin. Nice to know that you're not saying marijuana is that gateway. A federal lawsuit demands pharmaceutical manufacturers be held responsible for such abuse and addiction. The laws alleges that racketeering, aggressive overpromotion, fraudulent claims, and reckless production, all the things that I've been claiming. So I'm not out there headhunting for people that actually legitimately use opioids for their pain. No, I'm not going after you. I'm going after the people that made people that didn't need that think they did. And then I'm also going after the manufacturers for just like loading warehouses up, and then that shit gets to the streets eventually. About 175 Americans die every day from opioid use. About 75% of opioid abusers begin their addiction through prescription opioids since the 2000s. Those statistics are according to Macomb County officials. The county is part of 9 other Michigan municipalities, including Detroit and Lansing, backing this lawsuit. In addition to the tragic loss of life, counties in other Michigan cities have sustained significant costs for providing additional medical care, rehabilitation, and treatment for those suffering addiction, dependence, and overdose and death. Increased law enforcement and public safety personnel, and treatment, care, or foster placement of minors suffering from parental addiction. Statement from the group reads, wow. Wayne and Oakland counties filed a similar lawsuit going after pharmaceutical companies for marketing practices. So this is starting to be reminiscent of the tobacco, when Big Tobacco finally had to pay the piper and all these people were suing the different big tobacco companies, and the big tobacco companies ran to the federal government to get cover, and they got cover, but they ended up still having to pay out huge sums, crippling amounts of lawsuit payments to individuals that were technically just suing because somebody in their family died or whatever, they got cancer. And this is looking like the same thing getting repeated over again, only instead of individual people. Well, during that tobacco fallout, that did happen too. Like whole states were suing R.J. Reynolds, for example, because, their Medicare and Medicaid costs went through the roof for, basically filling up hospitals, creating hospitals specifically for cancer from the tobacco products. And I don't know, just throwing everything in there, throw the whole book at them, say all the heart disease increase and all this other stuff that cigarettes causes. I don't know how I feel about these lawsuits. It always seems like when it comes down the line that the pharmaceutical companies end up getting hit with a fine that's usually not even a fraction of 1/4 profit. So it's basically not even a slap on the wrist. So we'll see, keep trying to do all this. Whatever, man. We're doing every tool in the shed for this opioid epidemic except cannabis. So as soon as the federal government says, I think we should look at cannabis as a way to help us in this opioid crisis, then I'll know they're serious about actually doing anything about it. With Chris Christie's commission and all the other shit that happened, it looks like they're just trying to go for status quo, and I don't know what, they figure it's never going to end because there's always going to be new addicts, and you got to get the old addicts out of the way, get the new addicts in. So this is a weird story. New Mexico Hemp Industry blocked again in a court ruling. Who the fucking hell has anything against hemp? I don't understand that. The federal government's already gave its nod 2 times. One, to say that you could grow it for research purposes, and then again to say that you can grow it and manufacture it, sell products with it, sell it raw, whole, sell medicine made from it. So hemp-derived CBD is legal in all 50 states. I don't know what the fuck this bullshit is here. Why would you be against hemp? New Mexico's hemp industry is on hold again after the state Supreme Court put the brakes on 2 bills setting up the hemp production. The 3-2 decision doesn't mean New Mexico's hemp program is permanently blocked, according to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Sorry. Instead, the justice ruled that 2 hemp bills vetoed last year by Republican Governor Susana Martinez should be considered vetoed until a more thorough examination of how Martinez vetoed them. A lower court had ruled that the hemp bills should become law because the governor used improper procedure to veto them. New Mexico's hemp standstill has frustrated advocates who point out that New Mexico's northern neighbor, Colorado, leads the nation in hemp production. And they're doing quite well with that. Thank you very much. You've heard the expression, justice delayed is justice denied. This is the epitome of that, said State Senator Cisco McSorley, who sponsored the hemp bills, according to the New Mexican. Martinez, a former prosecutor, previously opposed the hemp measure because she said police could confuse the plant with marijuana. But she wrote no explanation last year in vetoing 2 hemp bills. The New Mexico Supreme Court gave no timetable for giving the hemp vetoes a closer review. I don't know how she got away with that when she did, saying the police could confuse the plant with marijuana. No, there's scientific ways to distinguish the two, so you don't get to use that excuse. That's just called ignorance, and ignorance is not an excuse. Ignorance of the law is certainly no excuse, right? So why should ignorance of what is legal and what isn't? Why should you be allowed to be ignorant of that when you're the fucking law enforcement? Come on, man. That's right away. The Supreme Court should have raised an eyebrow on that one. Like, huh? What's she talking about? You can't confuse marijuana with hemp. One of them don't even hardly have any at all trace THC in it. So there you have it. Just ridiculous. Another weird story. This guy here seems to think that Utah is going to legalize marijuana. Maybe he's talking about medical, but even so, Utah Governor Herbert said Wednesday until Utahns will vote to legalize medical marijuana. He said that they will. Whether that will be this November when it may be on the ballot as an initiative or a future year, the governor didn't say. Speaking to a middle school class in Riverton, Herbert was asked by a student about legalization in the Beehive State. Didn't know that it was the Beehive, but I think they will legalize it, he said, according to Fox 13 reporter who was in attendance, who noted adults in the room raised their eyebrows at the statement. I think it's going to happen, the governor added. The governor's spokeswoman, Anna Ledenhard, said later in the day that the governor's comments were generally geared toward the long-term future of medical marijuana rather than any specific initiative, but she added he did recognize popular support behind the Utah's Patient Coalition's ballot initiative, but didn't go any further than that. In polls, Utahns have shown broad and consistent support for medical marijuana legalization in recent months. An October poll commissioned by the Salt Lake Tribune and the University of Utah's Hinckley Institute of Politics found 75% of Utah voters either strongly or somewhat supported the initiative. A UtahPolicy.com poll last month similarly found 73% support for legalization. Now, what they say about polls versus the ballot itself is usually if your poll numbers are above 60, then there's a pretty good shot that at the ballot you're going to pass. So I think that these guys are a shoo-in there with 75% on the poll. Very excited for November. Patients are near tears in anticipation for the relief, the Utah Patients Coalition tweeted in response to the governor's comment. The group continues to gather signatures around the state for the initiative. More than 113,000 are required, and they are due to the state by April 15th. Herbert has weighed in before on medical marijuana in 2015. He said he was, quote, open to the idea, including, quote, a discussion of how it can be used as a medicine based on science. He said almost a year ago he supported state lawmakers' push for more research on the impacts of medical marijuana. Uncertainty over how President Donald Trump's administration might view marijuana persuaded Utah lawmakers not to move towards medical legalization in 2017, but they did fund additional research on the drug. Quote, the governor continues to believe good public policy should be guided by the best medical science. Well, that's nice to know. I'd like to know what their research is, and how they're researching medical marijuana anyway. But I'm kind of glad the lawmakers did not move to legalize in 2017. It always seems like that's what the battle is in these places that are actually allowed to do ballot initiatives, is whether or not the government of that area is going to legalize legislatively themselves. Because so far, these legislative legalization packages are just some kind of giveaway to rich people, because it doesn't look like anybody can afford to get involved in the licensed production or distribution side of it unless you have tons of money. That's basically where I'm at. All right, we're going to try to get through this really quick, but it's your guide to California's new recreational marijuana rules. And don't forget that in your area in California, still not everybody has recreational sales. So that's kind of a little bit of a head scratcher, why anybody would not want to participate in this. It's just stupid. I mean, can you think of, and I know there's dry counties down south and dry, that stupid bullshit still going on in the Bible Belt. But outside of that, and you'll probably still have that somewhere in America where there'll never be any legal marijuana allowed. But I guarantee you it ain't going to be any town in fucking California. So give me a break. All these old right-wing people that hate marijuana and love Jesus or whatever, they're all about to die, man. They're like 80 years old and shit. So after their ship sails, I don't think you're gonna. It's just like alcohol prohibition. Can you think of anywhere that don't have a fucking bar or three? Any town? All right. What about a liquor store or place where you can go buy beer and wine? Yeah. The grocery store, you mean, or the gas station? Yeah. Like, this is so stupid that someone would not want to participate in this shit. It's California. Wake the fuck up. Anyway, so they're saying that this is going to bring sweeping changes as the state's much anticipated medical and adult use cannabis regulation and safety act fully comes into effect. Passed by voters in November of 2016, Proposition 64 legalized recreational cannabis for people 21 and older. The initiative allowed for processing, transporting, and sharing up to an ounce of cannabis and 8 grams of cannabis concentrate, as well as growing as many as 6 plants at home. But unlike other states that have legalized weed, California has more than 20 years of experience dealing with legalized medical marijuana, which has actually complicated the process of nailing down some of the specifics regarding recreational use. So the state gave itself until the start of 2018 to sort things out. The city of LA and LA County have been scrambling along with legislators to establish regulations for businesses that cultivate, manufacture, distribute, and sell weed and related products. Some rules that go into effect on January 1st are likely to change, but for now, here's what you need to know. To sell pot and its products legally, retailers need to have a license issued by the state's Bureau of Cannabis Control, formerly known as the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation, as well as permission from local authorities to operate. Alex Traverso, the Bureau Chief of Communication, says his department won't know until the time comes how many applicants there will be on New Year's Day. I've heard the numbers are good. Okay. Although a 2016 California Department of Food and Agriculture survey found 2,718 companies interested in seeking licenses in LA County, the state is also prepping temporary licenses good for 4 months to go to existing dispensaries that can prove they're in compliance with local regulations. In the city of Los Angeles, applications from existing medical marijuana dispensaries will get priority provided they're submitted within 60 days of when licenses become available. The city hasn't yet determined when it will start issuing them, and under the proposed guidelines released in September, cannabis delivery will be available. As for what types of stores you can expect to see, Josh Drayton, the Communications and Outreach Director of California's Cannabis Industry Association, says to think more boutique and less neon and bong head shop. The consumer has changed, he notes, and modern brick-and-mortar dispensaries are turning into well-organized showrooms and lounges. That's cool, whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think the product is more important than the environment. And probably if everybody's quality is about the same, you're just paying for overhead when you go into a place fancy, and that's what they pride themselves on. I really don't see the point of it. Now, I'm not saying that everybody, hey, what's wrong with the tie-dyed curtains and the big weed leaves everywhere. I don't really care for that either. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't think anybody should make a big deal out of it either way. Why can't we treat this shit more just like groceries or something? Come on. In June of 2017, Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill making regulations the same for recreational and medical marijuana, but the distinctions between the two will remain. Beginning with cultivation, cannabis will be slapped with either an A for adult use or M for medical use, and all businesses involved in the cannabis industry will receive an A license or an M license. Retailers have an option of being dual licensees. People with a medical card should hang on to that because medical marijuana will still be available to patients 18 and older. Why 18 and older? If it's medical marijuana, it should be available to all patients, no matter what age. Plus, says Jolene Foreman, staff attorney for the Drug Policy Alliance, some strains and some shops will continue to cater specifically to patients' needs. Recreational users taxes. Recreational users in LA will pay a 15% state excise tax as well as a 9.5% county sales tax. Some areas will change an additional business tax, and there are taxes associated with growing, distributing, and selling too. Wow. I did see somebody's receipt on day one, and it was basically an eighth out the door for at the total I think was $68, but it could have went higher than that. That was like some mid-level 15 a gram shit. But yeah, the taxes was almost like $20 on an eighth. Shit, man. Economists estimate that those fees could bring in $1 billion in revenue to the state, according to the city controller Ron Galiperin. LA could bring in at least $50 million in tax revenue next year. And they're telling you what the government's going to do with the money. They're trying to act like it's a fair market. Kat Packer, the first executive director of LA's Department of Cannabis Regulation, has emphasized her interest in leveling the playing field for neighborhoods that have been heavily impacted by marijuana prohibition, namely low-income communities of color. She and others have advocated giving everyone a fair shake to profit from Proposition 64. Barriers to entering the market include prior convictions and potentially high price points. From licensing applications to real estate, say Denver-based Emmett Reistoffer, a cannabis policy consultant. Quote, we're looking at training programs to get people educated, he said, and also to provide consultants, legal services, accounting, and things like that at a lower cost to expedite those applications. If you're talking about these people that have been oppressed, better make sure that you don't have restrictions on people that got busted before for marijuana crimes or whatever, that bullshit, because that's what's going on in Michigan. Like, people can't get these new licenses if they just got busted running a dispensary, and it sucks. Who else are we trusting to run dispensaries? And what is this shit? You're talking about helping these poor people or these minorities. How are you going to do it? If the application fee is this, X amount of money, and you got to have this much money in the bank and all this other shit, how are you going to expect somebody that's been poor and, marginalized in neighborhoods that were beat down by the drug war, how are you going to expect them to have any of that money? And if you waive it for them, people over here on the other side of the fence are going to be like, what the fuck was that? How'd that happen? And maybe you're going to have somebody who doesn't have that background but still got arrested for marijuana. I'm saying like some rich white kid from the suburbs got arrested for marijuana growing when he was a kid, and or when he was 18, and he had to do some felony prison time and shit. What about him? Just because he don't live in the area of town that's considered beat down by the drug war, and there's so many things about this fair thing that I still haven't really sunk my teeth into it exactly, but from the outside looking in, man, I haven't really seen how you're going to be able to pull this shit off. You really have to just get some charitable people that are going to help people do some shit. Savings. Come on, man. I've already seen where the cops in California are talking about they're going to want more money because they're going to be doing more code enforcement than ever. Some police departments where pot has been legalized have cited a drop in forfeitures of property seized from people suspected of illegal drug activity, which are a source of revenue for those departments. On the flip side, research has suggested that there's big money to be saved by not having to enforce pot laws, and money will certainly be saved among users who will be spared legal fees if that they have faced in the past. I don't know if I agree with anything that they just said there, but we'll see how it plays out. All right, whatever. Public consumption. So we already don't care. You know what? People that smoke weed, we don't really care what you think about us consuming weed kind of in a private type situation. We're not sitting there right in the smack dab middle of downtown, right? Like blazing up. But if we are, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody that smokes weed, but most people are a little bit considerate. They'll at least like go off to the side, maybe in the bushes or some shit. But whatever, man. So we get it. You guys want to keep this no smoking in public thing and say it loud and act like secondhand smoke's a big deal. We know what it is, man. People that don't smoke weed, they fucking hate the smell of weed. I have no idea why that is. They're offended by it. But whatever, man. And then you got the fines and penalties. Anyone caught selling to a minor faces 3 to 7 years, it says. Right here. That's pretty intense. Selling weed without a license or having more than allowable amount of cannabis carries a penalty of $500, 6 months in jail, or both. So again, didn't really come with a whole lot of decriminalization. And how are you going to even know if I had more weed than I'm allowed to have? Are you going to fucking pull my bag of weed out every time you see me and fucking weigh it? What's the big deal here? Smoking in public carries a $100 fine that jumps to $250 for smoking in places where tobacco's banned. Okay, so smoking weed is worse than smoking tobacco for some reason? And if you do it where you can't smoke tobacco, you even have to pay for that. So whatever, man. This is interesting here. In 2017, Governor Brown took a step further. Let's go back. As of November 9th, 2016, the fine for driving with an open cannabis container, which defines as a container as anybody's guess, is up to $250. And what does open mean exactly? So does weed containers generally have a seal on them? Because I've never seen that. I mean, maybe in a place where you go to the store and buy cannabis products, but that's... Anyway, in September of 2017, Governor Brown took it a step further by signing a bill that specifies a $70 fine for smoking or consuming marijuana while driving. Vaping on the sidewalk? Of course they're breaking the law. Vaping on the sidewalk shouldn't be a problem, man. It's not hurting anybody. Alright, I don't know, man. I don't want to read any more of this shitty article from the Los Angeles... what is this publication? Los Angeles Magazine. Alright. Yeah, get your shit together, Los Angeles Magazine. Legalized marijuana will be a bit different than the version that voters bought. California is days away from launching a legal marketplace for adults to buy and sell recreational marijuana. On January 1st, the state will carry through on vision voters endorsed by passing Proposition 64 last year. Yet, as legal cannabis moves from the campaign pitch to reality amid lots of lobbying and industry groups along the way, some details of the plan have changed. State regulators approved the official rules last month and will update them in about a year. Quote, some of the things that were touted during Proposition 64 campaign definitely have been changed or reneged, said Andrew Acosta, a political consultant who worked on the campaign against the initiative. Keep that in mind. Here are a few ways the new rules different from what voters may have expected. Protecting small farms. Indeed. Campaign literature supporting Prop 64 last year said the initiative protects small farmers so California marijuana industry isn't overrun by mega corporations. The measure was crafted to give small-scale growers a 5-year advantage for forbidding licenses for pot farmers bigger than 1 acre in 2023. I think I just heard about Mike Tyson picking up a 40-acre farm, and there's other celebrities whose farms are more than 20 acres. Last time I looked at this one celebrity, I can't remember the name, so I'm not going to try. That was a 80-acre zoned out to 80 acres. So yeah, I guess that one got thrown right out the window. And it was supposed to, give the growers a 5-year advantage by forbidding licenses for pot farms bigger than 1 acre until 2023. Now many of the mom and pop growers who were supposed to benefit are crying foul. They say the new rules won't protect them because there's no limit on the number of small farm licenses a business can get. A grower can now get 10 licenses and effectively be a large grower. That seems like a loophole, said Hezekiah Allen, executive director of the California Growers Association, which represents more than 1,000 marijuana businesses, including many small farms in the northern reaches of the state. Legislators from the North Coast went even farther when State Senator Mike McGuire called the current rules a broken promise. A Democrat from Healdsburg, McGuire issued a statement saying that without a cap on the number of licenses, large corporations will crush the livelihood of the small family farmers. A spokesman for the Department of Food and Agriculture, which regulates cannabis farms under Prop 64, said the rules don't include a cap on small licenses. Quote, because Prop 64 did not provide authority to impose such a limit. However, spokesman Jay Van Ryn said, local jurisdictions may impose that type of limit on their own if it meets the needs of their constituents. Tap and app delivery to your doorstep. That was another thing that Prop 64 said emphatically last year, that the initiative was not intended to allow on-demand delivery of recreational marijuana, a popular service among medical users that allow them to order cannabis products from an online menu and have drivers deliver the drugs to their door. The Prop 64 campaign even made an argument before the judge saying the initiative would not allow customers to place orders online, only in a brick-and-mortar establishment. They weren't trying to beat back opposition from law enforcement groups. They were trying to beat back opposition from law enforcement groups that argued that internet-based home delivery would make it easy for teenagers to get marijuana. Oh, come on. No. No, it wouldn't. It just wouldn't. Now it turns out California will allow on-demand delivery of recreational cannabis, including for orders placed online. Quote, that was something we have heard a lot about from the very beginning, about how people wanted to be able to deliver people to people's homes, said Alex Traversio, a spokesman for the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which held public meetings around the state during the process of drafting the recreational marijuana rules. After hearing the reaction from people in the industry, from patients, from people who came to the summits and the town halls, it became clear that it was something we needed to look at. Prop 64 spokesman Jason Kinney said many local governments wanted rules that would allow for on-demand delivery. Some cities wanted to prohibit cannabis storefronts, but allow businesses to deliver it to customers who wanted it, who wanted to order online. Quote, we give them the authority to decide what takes place in their jurisdiction, Kinney said. Nothing that online delivery services must have a distribution premise licensed by local officials. Quote, we don't view it as being in conflict with arguments made in the Prop 64 campaign. Restrictions on advertising. Promises that Prop 64 would ban cannabis ads aimed at youth permeated the campaign last year. The The measure does restrict how licensed marijuana businesses can advertise, forbidding them from mounting billboards along interstate highways as well as near schools and playgrounds. But it turns out the language of the law doesn't cover all businesses that have commercial interests in marijuana. It leaves out companies like the popular website Weed Maps that promote cannabis business but don't directly sell marijuana themselves. Wow, man. Quit crying about this, San Francisco Chronicle. Man, you guys are such fucking reefer madness fools over there. I can't, it doesn't even make sense why you even keep up with this shit. If you don't like those Weed Maps billboards, why don't you go up across the street from them and fucking put up some of your reefer madness billboards and see which ones get laughed at the hardest, you dumb fucks. It's because the law restricts advertising only by licensed marijuana businesses, and a web platform that doesn't directly sell marijuana doesn't need a state license. Are you trying to say that they don't have freedom of speech, bro? Is that what you're trying to say? That Weed Maps doesn't deserve to have freedom of speech? That you should have some kind of law that prohibits that? You don't like First Amendment rights for people that are, Weed Maps? Weed Maps billboards, some sporting phrases like "Hi California" and "Hi Hollywood," "Hi Sacktown." What's the big deal? What's the big deal about that? What about in Colorado? I bet you they have one that says something about the Mile High City. You got a problem with that one too? Why are you such a crabby fucker about these billboards? The company has 120 billboards up in California, including 3 along interstate highways, said spokesman Carl Felicio. He said Weed Maps does not advertise near schools or playgrounds, nor do they care to. It's not their intention. They're not trying to sell weed to your kids. A bipartisan team of state legislators thinks that the website should be subject to the same rules as other marijuana businesses. Boy, more of that good old bipartisanship, huh? I tell you. They are clearly promoting the use of cannabis and advertising cannabis, and in my view, they should be subject to the same rules and regulations as licensees, said Assemblyman Rob Bonta, Democrat from Alameda. He's one of 5 lawmakers who signed a letter asking state regulators to find a way to limit ads on by marijuana-focused web platforms. Why don't you just stay out of it, dude? Let them have their First Amendment right. If they pay for the fucking billboard, they should be able to put on it whatever that they want. Granted that it don't break any rules of, whatever other bullshit restrictions on people's First Amendment rights you want to throw out there. I mean, vulgarity and like indecent obscenity, stuff like that, that's understandable. You're going to want that not to be there. Anybody can do that. But they're just telling you facts about cannabis. So clearly you just don't like to hear facts about cannabis. Maybe we thought at the time when we adopted Prop 64 that licensees was the appropriate universe to cover, but certainly Weed Maps is driving a truck through a loophole that should be closed. This guy's a Democrat, man. For all you idiots out there that keep fucking telling me how great Democrats are for marijuana, what's this guy talking about? Weed Maps billboards don't do nothing but tell you facts about cannabis. I've read them all right? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody criticize. So fuck you, dude. Someone please primary this guy or run against him and beat him. I don't even care if you're a Republican as long as you're not as dumb as this guy. Kinney, the Prop 64 spokesman, is also a lobbyist whose firm represents Weed Maps. The company spent at least $850,000 to help pass Prop 64 last year, and an additional $172,000 lobbying this year on its implementation. I guess he's trying to say that, Citizens United and all. Money is speech, and so yeah, I guess that's what he's saying. He said he couldn't comment on how Weed Maps will respond to lawmakers' demand to limit advertising, but he noted that regulating advertising by media platform is a slippery slope. Yeah, I would say you're a fucking, anti-constitutional, freedom-hating piece of shit is what I would call you. Yes,
501,
here we go
this is a story
again,
you'll
guys.
only see on
Yet
NBC Bay
another-
Area.
oh, look.
Keeping
Looks like
drivers safe in the new year.
commented on
An
that.
Oakland company is
That's
developing
special.
a breathalyzer to catch people driving.
Let's see what this is.
501, this is a story you'll only see on NBC Bay Area. keeping drivers safe in the new year. An Oakland company is developing a breathalyzer to catch people driving or working under the influence of marijuana.
No, they're not. They're not developing anything because they don't have anything that can do that. Even if it tells you an accurate THC count in somebody's system, that doesn't mean that that person will be, I don't know. You guys keep acting like THC and alcohol are the same thing too, by the way. No, marijuana doesn't fuck you up.
This as recreational pot becomes legal in just a few days. Today in the Bay's Pete Serrano joins us live with a closer look at this technology and how a lot of people are saying it could actually save lives. Good morning, Pete.
Yeah, good morning to you.
Who's saying that? The prohibitionists? Because nobody's out there saying that there's a big issue with fucking people driving stoned and crashing and killing people.
Laura, and yes, with the legalization of recreational marijuana around the corner, we know a lot of cities are coming up with their own rules on how to deal with it. But when we're talking about that new piece of technology, it's a marijuana breathalyzer, and supposedly it's supposed to detect if someone is impaired while they're driving or maybe showing up to work impaired. Now, it's created by a company based out of Oakland.
Shows up to work impaired. No, alcohol is the one you got to worry about, man. Alcohol, that's the one that impairs you. Marijuana gets you high, all right? Being high and being impaired, not the same thing. Being high doesn't mean you lose your faculties. Being high doesn't make you fucking make stupid fucking decisions.
Called Hound Labs. We're showing you guys a picture of that product, and it supposedly will measure how much THC is in your breath, which of course is the active ingredient in marijuana. Now,
see, Hound Labs has been around for a while. They've been trying to develop this thing for 8 years, so don't be fucking fooled by this new story about it. They've spent millions of dollars on this thing, and it still doesn't tell you shit. And even if it did tell you an accurate, breakdown of every fucking cannabinoid in your system and what's active and what ain't active, that doesn't mean this guy's stoned. I can smoke 10 times more weed than somebody that just started smoking weed, and I'm not going to be stoned, but I'm still going to have that same amount of weed in my fucking system because I smoked it.
The CEO of the company came up with this idea during his years as an ER doctor and also as a reserve sheriff's deputy. Now, the issue for law enforcement employers, of course,
but mostly
is
he's coming up with it because he's a greedy fucking capitalist that thinks there's a fucking place where he can get his foot in the door and make some money.
Is still under the influence of pot. Now, of course, a blood test doesn't give you an accurate picture since THC stays in your system for days. Neither does the smell of pot. Now, but the
damn, that's a pretty fat joint, lady.
CEO of the company claims if THC shows up in your breath, that means you smoked within the past couple of hours, and more than likely.
And so what? So what if you smoked in the last couple minutes? That doesn't mean you're fucking wasted. It doesn't mean you can't drive a car. It doesn't mean you can't operate machinery. That's alcohol.
You're impaired.
No, you're not impaired. Fuck off.
That's why this hasn't been done before. It's a huge...
Dude, that guy's stoned right now. I don't believe he is. It would be hard to believe that somebody that smokes marijuana their life mission is to fucking prove that people are stoned.
Technological and scientific challenge that we had to overcome.
I think he's just clowning and trolling. Like, he's obviously just like getting investment money for this product that he knows is never gonna fucking work. And even if someone does take it seriously, it's gonna be at the detriment of a lot of people like getting charged with this fucking fake crime here.
There's a few years to overcome it, but we figured it out, and we can measure just a few particles of THC. So it'd be like measuring a few drops of water in 100 swimming pools put together.
Yeah, but what if you're just I still, there's no way that you can prove to me that this device is accurate at measuring THC in the breath. Not that that even matters. What does it matter how much THC is in your breath? This isn't like alcohol where you drink enough of it and it just permeates through your whole fucking system because every single cell in your body is saturated with alcohol that reeks and it's fucking doing damage to shit. That's not how THC works. It's not how cannabinoids work.
The company is testing its third and final version, expected to hit the market at some point next year. The device, which also tests for alcohol, is expected to sell anywhere between $500 and $1,000. And the CEO
bingo, there you go. This guy's definitely, he's going to, I don't know, maybe buy stock in this shit and then dump it as soon as he like sells a bunch of them, and then next year they're all going to come back for a recall. This shit is not. The Supreme Court's going to knock this shit right off the shelf, guys. Sorry.
They're getting calls every day from law enforcement agencies and employers who are interested.
I wish they would have demonstrated it. That's just somebody blowing a fucking into a tube. How come you didn't show somebody smoking a joint, blowing into a tube? Let's see how much THC's in their breath. I want to know how this thing works. I want to see the fucking demonstration. I don't want you to just have some dummy standing there blowing
in
into the
purchasing
fucking
their
tube.
product. We're live in San Mateo.
I'm sure I speak for everyone that's as frustrated as I am
there.
to just watch that piece of shit report about this another stupid product that isn't going to do anything that it says it's going to do, and it can't possibly tell you if somebody is impaired on cannabis. I can tell you that most of the time they're not, because cannabis just simply doesn't do what alcohol does to you.